Okay, it says it's receiving your content.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right. So my apologies for us getting started so late. We have a new streaming setup, and we're still working out the bugs. This is all kind of new to us. We appreciate your patience. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Matthew, and
I'm Carolyn.
And we are with Active Galactic Videos. Active Galactic Videos is a group of students, and I'm the manager of the program. I'm an educational program manager here at Stewart Observatory at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And we have a group of students and staff who make education and outreach videos related to science and specifically astronomy. And so what we're here to do today is to talk to you about our most recent video, which was our first in a series. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody about our latest video that you created?
Yeah, so again, my name is Carolyn. I'm a videographer, editor, and animator for the channel, and sometimes writer. And this series is called Women of Discovery. It's all about women in science. And I pitched it to Matthew as a series late last year, around March. And I just thought it would be a really good way to like show our viewers and show everybody like just how many amazing women there are in science and doing crazy things. So first we started with Claire Max, who is at the University of California. She's a professor there, and she also has a lot to do with adaptive optics technologies that she made in the 80s. So I was actually interviewing her for a different video, and we decided to make it a double whammy and use her as our first Women of Discovery video.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about your background. So the way that Carolyn got involved with the project was she was a student here at the university, and so tell me a little bit about that.
So I got my degree in film production with our Bachelor of Fine Arts program in film, which is a extremely production heavy program. So I was working on sets, and actually I heard about this job and got recommended by one of my very good friends, Galen McCaw, who worked for AGV, and he was graduating, and he said they need more good people, so they brought me on, and it's been a really fun place to work, just in general, honing a craft, but also getting to work on subjects that I didn't have direct experience with, so I've learned a lot working here.
Excellent. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask Carolyn some questions about the video that we produced, and if you have questions, please post them in the chat, and we will get them and we'll answer them live on air. So we're going to start with, so I guess you talked a little bit about how the idea for the Women of Discovery series came about. So why did you choose to make a video about Claire Max?
So Claire Max is actually, she was one of the first, this isn't highlighted in the video, but this is a fun fact about her. She was actually the first woman to be a part of the JASON team, which is a team of scientists that work for the US government as scientific consultants. So I found out about Claire Max while we were working on our History of Adaptive Optics video, and just the history of that technology that was being developed during the Cold War. Check out our other video on
down in the
history of adaptive optics. And so I was doing my research, and I found her through a man called Friedrich Dyson, who also is Freeman Dyson. That Friedrich Dyson is a visual effects artist. Anyway, but so Freeman Dyson, who was doing, who was also a part of this JASON team, and I was researching that, and then I came across Claire Max's name and continued to do research into her, and just really found out that she had a lot to do with the development of the technologies as we know them today. So she was just like a really, seemed like big name, and she answered my emails. Always, if you ever have like, oh, I don't know if they'll email me back, always email them, because more than likely they're going to email you. Well, I shouldn't always say that, but Claire Max emailed me back. Thanks, Claire Max. And so I just thought she was a great kind of shining figure to start off our Women of Discovery, of just what can women achieve in science, and that is pretty much anything.
Yeah, and I believe she's the director of the UC
Mm-hmm.
observatories.
Yes.
Is that correct?
She is the director of the UC observatories, as well as a professor at UC Santa Cruz. No. It's in the video.
Okay. So anyway, so I have a couple of questions that we wanted to start with. So the first one is, what are some of the practical difficulties that you face when conducting an interview like you did via Skype?
Yeah.
So talk about that process.
So Claire Max does live in, we should be saying Dr. Claire Max, does live in California, so I set up a Skype interview with her, and it was a system that we had never really directly worked with before. Most of the time when we're shooting videos, we take our DSLR out into the field with our recording devices for audio, and it's just sort of straightforward. But this was, we had to go through a different program, which I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Is it?
I don't even remember what I think, was it OBS that we used?
I think it was OBS we ended up using to get this, to essentially record our Skype. The biggest problem was the sound, if I remember correctly. Like, we could easily record the video, but it was trying to hook up the sound to the video, and at first we were going to use
oh, that's right,
Pro
because
Tools.
It would take the sound from a microphone so we could get your sound, but we had a really difficult time getting the sound in from the computer. Like, we had a hard time getting the computer sound in, so it was like we were going to either record you or nothing. And we couldn't record Dr. Max.
And we had like 20 minutes before we were supposed to meet with Dr. Max, and it was really getting down to the wire. But we made it work in the end.
Yeah,
which was awesome.
And OBS is free software. It's streaming software, and a lot of people use it for Twitch streaming, gaming, and so it's a common streaming software. So if you're doing streaming, I'm sure we are using it right now, and it's got a lot of features that you can do. But it was brand new to us. We had never set it up and used it before, and so getting it to work that first time was. But I also feel like you need to jump in.
Yeah.
And so like we had to schedule it, and we had done tests, and we had been trying to figure it out for days, and it all came together at the last minute.
Yeah, which is how these things kind of tend to happen.
So the next thing I'd like you to talk about is about the about the idea of using an interview with somebody for two different projects, right? So you mentioned that a little bit earlier. So talk to me a little bit about the original project and why you were doing that, and then how you were able to piggyback the two of them together, and why you would do something like that.
Sure. So the original project, as I said, was the Adaptive Optics history video. And for those of you who don't know, Adaptive Optics is a technology. It was being developed in the 80s under the Reagan administration, under the Defense Department. So it was classified, but also astronomers have been interested in it since the 50s, because essentially what it does is it takes when light comes through the Earth's atmosphere from the stars, their light gets refracted by just all the particles in the atmosphere. So when you are looking from a ground-based telescope up at the sky, the light gets refracted, so you don't get a clear image. You get a blurry image. So what adaptive optics does is it takes that image, and it compensates using mirrors. It compensates for the distortion so you can get a clear image. So it's a really important technology, and we were doing this video on its connection with the Defense Department and how it came about. And like I said, Claire Max was not only monumental in the development of the technology, she specifically developed the laser guide star, which is how you are able to, what's the best way I can describe this? How you're able to essentially locate a galaxy where there's, because you need to.
So as far as I understand, the way it works is you can look at the first adaptive optics systems would look at a a natural star close to an object that you wanted to look at. And a star should be a point source. They're extremely far away, and so to most telescopes they look like a point.
Yeah.
And so you know kind of what they're supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so if that star is close to the object that you want to look at, say a galaxy, then you can correct for the atmospheric disturbance, the atmospheric distortion in the image with mirrors, and essentially it's a deformable mirror. And when you correct for the star's light, you're also correcting for anything that's nearby.
Yeah.
Now, not every object, as Dr. Max talks about in the video, not every object has a bright star nearby that you can use to correct it. So a laser guide star is a way of creating an artificial star that's high up in Earth's atmosphere that still gets distorted the same way as objects that are further away in space, but we can point it, we can put that artificial star, that guide star, anywhere in the sky that we want to look.
Yeah, and it's essentially a giant laser pointing up into the sky.
Right, and it excites sodium atoms up in the atmosphere. There's like a layer of sodium in the upper atmosphere, and when the laser light hits those sodium atoms, they give off light.
Yeah.
They absorb and then they re-emit the light is what's actually happening.
Yeah, and so this is, side note, what's so fun about this job is because I knew zero of that before I went on this long journey of doing this adaptive optics video, which was the bane of my existence and changed my life, and now I know so much about adaptive optics, it's not even funny.
But how long did we work on that video?
A year and a half.
At least.
I was grandfathered into the project, and then I was the only one working on it, and it took a very long time, and then I sort of passed it off to Aaron to help me with it because it was just a really complicated story. And so Claire Max was really only a small piece of that story. So I was getting this interview with her, and back to the original question, I just said, you know what, I need to know a lot about this adaptive optics stuff, but also you're such an influential person that I can very much use, and this was when the development of the Women of Discovery, it was a very new idea, and I was like, I will just tack on these questions, and I ended up using, in the editing process, I ended up using a lot of her questions that I had asked for the adaptive optics in portion of the interview, as well as the portion for the Women of Discovery interview, because essentially with the Women of Discovery, what we want to know is, what's your research like? What are you doing actively in the field? What have you contributed to the field? And also sort of the last question we answer, which I thought Claire Max's answer to this question was fantastic. The question is, what advice would you give to women who want to go into science or who are actively in science? And her philosophy is actually one that I definitely employ as a woman who wants to go into the film industry, and that's fake it till you make it. And that's truer words than I've ever heard. And it's clearly worked for her. So
yeah, I think a lot of people feel or don't feel confident in their skills even when they have tremendous skills. I mean, for you, for example, you are probably one of the top film students that we've had working with us. And you're welcome. And it's true. And, and so, if you feel that you're, not equipped, then, that's just, that doesn't necessarily match with reality.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think that even if you don't know what it is, like, even if you walk on somewhere and you're like, I don't know how to do this, you should have confidence in yourself in the ability to either A, figure it out, or just that your skills, like, you can always be learning these things. And so if you exude confidence, then people will think that you have confidence, and then you get things done, even if you are like, it is the blind leading the blind right now. But that's
sometimes what it takes.
Exactly. I also thought another portion of the interview that I really loved was her sort of origin story, where she was talking about being at a summer camp and looking through a telescope and looking at the mountains on the moon. And I thought that was really interesting because I had never really considered the mountains on the moon. But also, before I had started editing this, I had been working on the opening animation, which I want to go into animation. So that was something that I just kind of said, hey, Matthew, I'm doing this. And It took me a really long time, and I did it, and I was really proud of it. But I had separately come up with the idea for the animation of a little girl looking through a telescope even before I got to the Claire even before I started actually editing the video, and the interview had been so long that I forgot that she had said that origin story, and then I went back and watched it, and I was like, guys, this is crazy! So,
yeah, that worked out really well.
Yeah, it did work out really well.
Excellent. So another question that we have here, so I guess, how did you contact her, and talk a little bit about that? I mean, that process.
Found her email on Google, and then I emailed her, and then she emailed me back pretty shortly too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was fantastic to work with.
Yes.
I think that did she set things up, or did she have like an assistant that was
She did
helping?
have an assistant, because I think she is balancing a lot, but she was very nice, very kind, very open to any and all questions that I had. And I think it's just really encouraging to see people who realize how much science communication is important, not only to the community, but also potentially to her job. Like, she really seemed to feel that it was like a part of her sort of like duty to be able to answer these types of questions for the public, which I thought was really nice.
That's awesome. Did you learn anything about Dr. Max that you thought was particularly interesting? I guess you've talked about her, her how she got interested in astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn anything that was either surprising or that you hadn't known before?
I think just learning a little bit more about like what her exact role in the adaptive optics was, because it was many-folded. First of all, she developed the laser guide star. She put that on multiple different telescopes around the country, including at the University of Arizona, at Keck in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, so she did primarily, she invented, or her system started off at Lick Observatory,
Mm-hmm.
and then they installed one at Keck. And then what I thought was interesting was she talked about, I mean, really, she was instrumental in what now has become standard practice at telescopes around the world, because every major observatory in the world has an adaptive optics system.
Yeah.
And so originally, they were these kind of one-off systems that were paired with a special camera, and so
that needed a lot of people in order to sort of work it, and it just wasn't sustainable.
And if it was paired with a particular instrument, that meant if you swapped in another camera that either looked at different wavelengths of light or had a different purpose, you couldn't use the adaptive optics system. And so now I think she was calling it facility systems. So the goal ultimately, which is now they've achieved, is to have these adaptive optics based systems installed at every telescope, and they are kind of a separate system that can be used anytime with any instrument that they want. So the instrument is, the imaging instrument is fully separated from the adaptive optics system, so that you can plug and play whatever instrument you want
to really get the use out of the ground-based telescopes, because without this type of system, you're not able to see, essentially the clearest that you're going to be able to get is like something from Hubble, which is so limited. But now that all of these ground-based telescopes have them, that means that we can really make use of the ground-based telescopes, whereas before it was sort of like a lot of money was in them, but the results weren't that great. But to go back to the other part of your question, is that I also, of her role being many-folded, something that I learned from Freeman Dyson was she was also very heavily involved in the diplomacy to get it all declassified, which is what the adaptive optics video was all about. And when I was kind of talking to her about that, she was very humble. She was like, oh, I don't know. But Freeman Dyson is like, no, she had very skilled diplomacy, in that she had a large role of why it is now declassified, which has just changed astronomy.
Right, and a little bit about that story was that it was, it came from astronomers, but money in the 1980s was being funneled into adaptive optics systems from the Defense Department, and it was classified research, it was classified work for use on satellite imaging systems, satellite tracking systems, the Star Wars program of the 1980s. And once there were treaties in place to decrease the number of nuclear weapons, the system was no longer, needed, and also it didn't really pan out. Like not adaptive optics, but the other larger Star Wars program wasn't quite living up to the expectations. But the adaptive optics systems were, and astronomers didn't have any of the money or access to all of that work. And so in the 90s, I believe, they finally declassified all of that work.
Yeah.
And the astronomers got their hands on it.
Yeah.
And she was instrumental in that.
Yeah.
So Victoria says that we have a question. So why don't you read that question to us?
Yeah, we have a question from a live viewer. They ask, how do you approach a topic like women of discovery without being patronizing or seem like you're pandering? Interesting question.
Oh, that is a really interesting question.
So let's repeat the question. So how do you approach a topic or a subject like women of discovery without being pandering or patronizing about it?
Yeah. Well, I hope that question means that we didn't come across as patronizing. I think something that really helps is having the team who's working on this is all women. We have myself, who's sort of the producer and the creator, as well as the editor of it, but also all the two other people, Victoria being one of them, and Emily, who was our other editor, are both women. So I think we just want to hold these women up and be able to show what they can do. And I think a lot of it also comes, we're not asking them questions about, what are the struggles has it been to be a woman of science, which is sort of a different type of video. Instead, we just want to focus on, like, what are you doing and why is it so exciting? And I think that doesn't come across as patronizing because we're just shedding light on women who are extremely capable, and in the past those women have just not had the spotlight on them. So we're just sort of shifting the spotlight a little bit to illuminate what all of these women are doing and how exciting it can be.
Right. And I guess what I would say is that first of all is by focusing on the work.
Yes.
Right. We're focusing on their research and their science because that's what they do and that's who they are and that's what they want to promote. And so by focusing on their work, we're not being patronizing. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that it's really to go back to your spotlight question, is that there are these amazing women in science that few people have heard of. And they have contributed just as much as any other astronomers, but fewer people have heard of them. So really, we're just giving these women the same treatment that other men have gotten. So it's not, I mean, we're not really doing anything different. We're just giving them an opportunity to talk about their
We're
work
also
in their background.
letting them use their own words too. I mean, it's all of these videos are the next 4 to come are interview based, and they all are very well spoken individuals, as I'm sure is sort of a given when they're that intelligent and doing that great of work. But actually, something you said just reminded me of sort of the original inspiration. This actually started as a social media post on Wednesdays when I was a part of the social media team. I would post just women of science who hadn't, a lot of the times it was historical women who hadn't been sort of given as much credit as has happened in history, and sometimes it was women who were now sort of rocking it. So I think that if we just shift our focus a little bit of what has been happening in the past where they were sort of ignored, now we're just not ignoring them and we're just giving them sort of a place to describe all of their interesting work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's a
So
good
thank you very
question,
much for
though.
that question. I appreciate that.
It's definitely something to think about, like, while you're making these things, of like what's the tone that you're setting off. So yeah, being mindful
Absolutely.
of that.
Well, and then again, asking, some basic questions about, things like, what's it like to be in astronomy, and then do you have any perspective on that as a woman in astronomy? And a lot of times when you talk to women in science, that comes up anyway, because that's just part of the history of science and the history of our world, that fewer women were in these fields, and so people like Claire Max were really pioneers, and so it inevitably comes up that I was one of only 2 women in my entire class, or I was the only woman in my class. So I mean, those are part, these stories are part of their identities already anyway. So it's not something that is a secret, or that nobody or that we have to drag out of them, because it's usually part of their story.
And I think, you'll find, we were talking about women in science, I think you'll find this type of dynamic across many different fields. Definitely in the film industry, it's women are really starting to be recognized as great directors. And when I was in high school, my theater teacher told me, I told him I want to be a film director, and he goes, oh, it's a boys' club, right? And I was like, all right. But that's not the case anymore. But we're still sort of in the early days of that. You know what I mean? We're not, it's not like problems fixed.
Right.
Like, we're still trying to hold up women because we love our women,
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about our next few Women of Discovery videos. So the next video that we have coming out is an interview with Jesse Christensen, and then
a scientist at Caltech, an astronomer at Caltech.
And then after that,
we have Ekta Patel, who is a grad student here at the University of Arizona.
And after that, we have
Ingrid Michelson?
Ingrid Dalbar.
Ingrid Dalbar. I'm sorry, I didn't do that interview, but where is she?
She is at JPL.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because that's when we did our Palomar trip. That's when we
so
got
she's going to be talking about Mars. And that's another one where actually all of these, I believe, we did sort of double dipping. So for those of you who are doing science communication or interested in science communication, I'm sure you've thought of this already, that when you get an interview with somebody that can be hard to get access to, you don't want to waste that opportunity, and you want to take advantage of the time that you have with them. And if you can get multiple scenes out of that for multiple videos, then you can basically leverage that time for a variety of videos. So if you've watched our recent HiRISE video, the HiRISE and Shine video, there's some of the footage with Ingrid in there. But then we also have a whole a whole video that will just focus on her and her work. And then is that all of them so far?
And then we still need to do one more interview with, it'll be, I believe, a scientist from the U of A. We're trying to get Brenda Fry, but she's kind of busy. So stay tuned. Who's the last one going to be?
Exactly. It's a mystery. Our last mystery guest.
But that's also what's kind of fun about these series is we have a lot of work set up in advance, but we're also that's not going to be until May, right? The last one. So we have we're still in the development phase, and we're still learning as we go with this Women of Discovery. But I'm really glad that it's, we have the sort of time to highlight each of these women, and we have time to find people who are doing really great work. So yeah.
Excellent. So unless we have any other questions, I think we're going to wrap things up. Is there anything else that you want to mention about the production or creation of this video, either in terms of filmmaking or interviewing, that you think we haven't covered yet?
No, I think we've covered most of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We're going to be doing these for the foreseeable future. This is kind of our new format. We're going to release a video about some kind of scientific content or concept, and then after that, the week after, we will talk with the creators of the video, and I'll interview them, and we'll talk about how that video was made. And if you have comments or questions that you can contribute, and for those of you who are also science communicators or filmmakers, and if you have other answers or other responses to the comments that we've made, please include those down in the comments as well. We hope to start a discussion for science communicators and science educators about how best to create these videos, and we just want to be part of that conversation. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I'm Matthew, an education program manager with Active Galactic Videos.
And I'm Carolyn, a videographer, editor, animator, producer, etc.
So many hats.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Victoria for being our engineer behind the scenes.
And thank you to our question. That was so exciting.
It was great. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye.